teach you how to play against OWENS defense. Previous broadcast was about fun and was supposed to be entertaining, and it surely was. This one is going to teach you how to beat Nakamura and the man Hamilton. I'm saying that because tonight I'm just about to teach you how to play against e4 b6. Lately I've seen this opening so many times against, you know, literally like every 10th game in Blitz or Bullet I faced that b6 move, so it could be interesting. It could be interesting, and you know what? This is good even for d4 players, because whether they play e4 or d4, we just go for the same good stuff. So whether they play e4 b6, you play d4 bishop b7. For the guys who play d4 b6, you can also enter this position. No kidding, the variation that I'm about to show you is really great, and it's really challenging for black players who go for this defense. I even played against the guy, he's a Russian IM, who's like main representative of this opening, and I've been crushing him with this opening, and at one point he just stopped playing it. Let's go. So OWENS defense, how to crush it, by the Butcher once again, and this is just a continuation of chessbrah opening repertoire with white pieces, e4 first move. Tonight's lecture will be about e4 b6, called OWENS defense. One more time, it's universal because even d4 players can reach into this variation and can fight very, very hard even against the top players. You play bishop d3, you defend this pawn, it was under the attack. They have to play e6. It's the most flexible move, whether they play e6 or knight f6. If they go for f5, I remember I played this against my dad when I was a kid. Then when I started playing chess, you have to take. And this is one of those gambits where if you take on f5, you just have to know how to play it. Eric Hansen clearly threatens that he's going to refute my openings with white pieces. I guarantee it's not going to be possible. So guys, no way that's gonna happen. So after bishop g2, queen h5, looks like it's checkmate, but it's not. Don't even think it's that easy. There are like some moves you gotta find here. So after g6, f takes g6. Now you threaten mate in one move. For example, if they take the rook, you just play either g takes h7 or g7 checkmate, so you just have fun with your opponent. After bishop g7, that's the only move. By the way, if knight f6, I can seriously just give you a puzzle here to wait you for like 5 seconds and to say white moves and wins. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Who didn't find this one? You guys really have problems with tactics. It's of course g takes h7, sacking the queen, and after knight takes h5, bishop g6, checkmate. So that's the way it is. After f takes g6, they simply have to play bishop g7. When they play bishop g7, 99% of players after g takes, of course you should take an h7 with a tempi here, and give that check with a tempi, but the real things are coming right now. So after king f8, here, like I guarantee 99% of you would simply take the knight on g8. That's exactly what I'm telling you. That's exactly what I explain to my students all the time. If somebody plays the gambit nowadays with all those really, really unbelievably strong engines, you don't have to just move around, try to improvise. No, all you have to do is just to learn these lines. So here there is like very concrete refutation. Knight goes to f3. Knight goes to f3. Who would say you're not supposed to take the knight, but to play knight f3? Looks a little bit crazy, but that's the way it is. Why? You want to play knight g5 now, and when they play the most logical move, if they play, of course, you also want to play knight e5. Let me show you. So if they play bishop h1, you play knight e5, knight e5, and after queen e8, this is the only move because knight e5 threatens the mate on f7. You just have to play queen e8. You just take there, promote rook or the queen, it's your choice, rook g8 and knight g6. The mate is simply coming. So this one is not a problem. The problem is if knight e5, what happens if they simply take this knight? You take by the pawn, and now look, you threaten this move queen f5, you threaten to take the knight followed by bishop h6. They don't have a proper defense here, so it's winning. You can check these variations. This is just mate. You don't have to worry about that. So objectively speaking, the strongest move here is knight f6. That's the most logical. Looks like after you play queen g6, you've got nothing. You now threaten bishop h6, followed by bishop h6, queen h6, king f7, knight g5, mate. You also threaten this bishop on g2. So they have to take. Either rook on h1 or knight on f3. If they take knight on f3, you just play rook g1, threatening mate on g7. They have to take, and now you go for the refutation of this gambit. This is really tough. So for all of you who just want to have some fun, feel free to play this f5 and blitz games with the black pieces. I guarantee, who doesn't know the refutation, and they most of the times they simply don't know it, you should just go for they're just going to go with some knight c3 or f3, or you know what, let's put it this way, if you don't know the refutation of something where you're supposed to sack even pawn, not to mention piece, or in this case rook, don't go for that. So you better be well prepared for what's coming in the game. So that's why I'm telling you here, after queen g3, you threaten to take the rook on h7, you threaten to take the bishop on f3. They simply have to go with this one, and after this, check, knight is hanging. If knight f6, you will take the rook. Crazy line. After all these sacrifices, you're rook up. If they simply play anything else, you just take the knight. You're not up anything else but one pawn, but simply they can hardly defend this position because you'll play some d5, knight c3, bishop h6. You're basically so much ahead. Speaking of development, they have to play knight c6 to defend this rook. You play d5, knight a5, knight c3, and they literally don't have a good move. You can, for example, play bishop f4, long castle, and consider some bishop e5, doubling your rook along the g file and mating that king. This is good. And this is not problematic. Once again, whoever plays f5, you better check out this video and make sure that after e takes f5, bishop g2, queen h5, g6, f takes g6, they have to play bishop g7. This is the only move you take with the tempi, and here the refutation comes. It's the knight f3 move. Who doesn't know knight f3, who cannot remember this move, better don't go into all these complications. The story is very simple. So after knight f3, I just want to show you what happens in case they take on f3. You just take on f3, and the rook is hanging on a8. That's all. After bishop d3, e6. What is interesting about this opening? This opening became very fashionable lately, ever since one international master from Russia, Ilya Farshmakov, published out his book about this opening b6. Then I heard that the GM Christian Bauer from France also published out the book with the black pieces about this opening, and probably everything happened. And I mean, this variation gained such a big popularity, of course, thanks to no one else but one of the best blitz players in the world, Hikaru Nakamura. He constantly keeps playing this b6 opening with black pieces. I had the pleasure to confront him a couple of times. I have to say, I just learned all these analyses. I knew them. I was winning most of the times, but I guess I just lost 2 of those games out of 3 because he's just way better than me. So after like e6, you just have to go for knight c3. By the way, this is especially interesting for the chessbrah viewers because one of the most popular streamers of this site, which you could have seen like a couple minutes ago, Aman Hambleton, constantly keeps using this variation with black pieces. And at one point, I'll show you one of the games that I played against him on ICC on 5 or 3 minutes, I'm not sure. I used this variation and I just have to brag around a little bit. I won that game. So after like knight c3, they play either knight f6 or something else, but let me just show you this one. So after knight c3, you know what? They have to play knight f6. That's simply the only move. But before we go with this variation, let me just show you what happens if they now play f5. If they now play f5, you should take. By the way, if you want to play something without any risk, then you just have to go with queen h5, g6, and you have to put your queen on e2. That's a very solid advantage. You just weaken the dark squares and you're better. If you want to play something even, actually not more solid, but winning, now you should be going with e takes f5, bishop g2, queen h5, g6, take, bishop g7, g takes h7, king f8. Literally the same position. The only difference, we've got a knight on c3 here as an improvement. They have an e6 as an improvement. Both of these moves are improvement for both of these sides. So you just play bishop g5. This is a killer move. I read some book and somebody said that this position was reached in a couple of games and several subsequent games, but nobody seems to have played the strongest move here. And now they just gave something. They just gave something like, I believe, knight f3, or I'm not sure exactly which move. I actually have to show you the real refutation. The real refutation of this line is bishop g5, not what they mentioned in all these books. So after you play like bishop g5, queen is under threat, they have to play knight f6. Nothing else is possible. On queen e8, just bishop g6. So after like knight f6, looks like you're going to pin this knight and play knight e4. So when they play like this, the key move is coming now. Not bishop e4, threatening the bishop on h1 and the rook on a8, but knight g on e2. This knight goes towards g6 or goes towards h5, pinning this weakness. It's completely illogical. It's very difficult because you just have to once again know all these variations where you just sack whole rook, and you better be well prepared. So after knight c6, knight f4, knight b4, trying to get rid of this bishop and eventually trying to take on h7, knight g6 check. This one, otherwise in king f7, knight e5 with following mating threats. And finally, but okay, you can also take, and after this, you just take, knight takes d3, getting rid of important bishop, and the key move as a refutation of this line. What's so strong? You now want to put your knight back, you want to promote your pawn, you threaten the bishop, you threaten the knight. This system is really difficult. I guarantee that even some good GMs don't offer this refutation, so you better be well prepared. Don't ask me here, why do you actually have to play like this? You just want to include your rook on the back rank. You want to threaten the bishop. You're threatening the knight. You want to play knight g6. You want to play h8, promoting the queen. Completely lost. But it's difficult. It's difficult. You also have a threat of like rook takes h1 and knight e4. So all you have to do, you know, I always say there are three type of variations and three type of theoretical lines. Ones where you have to simply learn a couple of first moves and then you learn like middle games and plans there. Other type of positions where you have to know like accurate order of moves, but once again you more or less have to rely pretty much on plans. And finally you have crazy ones where you have to sack something or where you simply have to learn everything by heart. Simply those are bad lines. You just simply have to learn them by heart and win the games. That's all. So after like king e2, this is winning for white. Of course, I'm not going to brag around anymore. Actually, this is all found by these top engines. Lately in Blitz, when, for example, I play game or two against somebody and beat him with the following analysis, then they just try the double fianchetto. Then you play just f4, bishop g7, knight f3, knight e7, castles d6, and guys, if you watched my lecture the last week about how to break the modern defense, e4, g6 first move, you certainly know what should be the move here for white. Okay, let's prove that you watched the lecture. You have 15 seconds to find the move here. It's very typical and it was really covered in previous lecture. So let's see who did his homework. In the meantime, I'm just gonna get a glass of water. So let's go there. I'll be waiting for like 10 more seconds. Somebody said 97. Hey, it's white to move, white to move. Hey, what is happening with you guys? It's white to move. What a great viewers you are. You don't even know who's on move here. Okay, I had some e5 variations. I had some other ideas. Oh, finally, some of you suggested, not some of you, actually a big number of these guys suggested f5. Exactly. So when you play f5, it gives white a promising attacking position here. So you know it, we open up this bishop, we break along the f file, we want to take on e6, sometimes even push the pawn to f6 doing a fork. We want to play queen e1, queen h4, which is a typical GPA or Grand Prix attack idea, and that's it. That's it. Of course, if they take e takes f5, you just take f5, and this is almost lost. So this is why they just have to make this alternative. Nakamura played against me bishop before a move later, where I actually think it's a bad variation. And here we just have to take this one as a pretty dangerous alternative for our refutation, because we go with this move. You know what? I read all these books about this b6 variation. None of these books covered the following variation with the knight g on e2. So the whole refutation of this system is based on the following move, knight g on e2. What's so strong about this? You just make these flexible knights. You just prepare yourself to make castle. You just, in case they take on c3, which actually happens in many of these variations, recapture by knight on e2 and get like a proper center without breaking pawn structure, without help, you know, just worrying about your king's, about your king's defense, because you're gonna put castle afterwards, and afterwards you'll be just able to launch the attack on the king's side, having the bishop here and doing a great thing. So after, you know what? Please remember, you just have to put knights like this. You should avoid simply planting your knight on f3. That's the point. So now black has certainly a couple of variations here. They can go with d5, they can go with c5. This is an early version of what am I going to teach you. Yes, on knight f6, I'm going to show you knight g on e2, and that's the variation to go. So after knight g on e2, they can go d5. You take on d5, and after queen takes d5, you just play knight f4. They can't touch the pawn. Please don't fall for that one. I'm teaching you this one for white, but in similar situations, make sure not to make similar mistakes. Queen takes d4 doesn't work because bishop b5 discovered check, and you just grab the queen. So they cannot touch the pawn on g2. And of course, next move, white should definitely castle and have a great advantage in terms of initiative. You just want to bring your queen on the king side. You just want to break with rook with the d5. You just want to play rook to e1 at some point. This is great for white. Okay, that's all about the bishop before c5, d5 stuff. If knight g on e2, c5, it's pretty much the same, almost a transposition in comparison to the variation that I want to show you. So you play d5. It's a very nice sacrifice. It's a very promising type of thing, and once they take, you're going to play actually one of the key variation of the whole system. By the way, tonight's lecture will be very short because I just found this variation very entertaining simply because it became that popular lately, and they really face this opening very often. So after like bishop takes d5, this just transposes into the line I'll teach you after knight f6 fourth move. So there we go. This is the refutation, and this is the move that simply, if you want to beat up this opening, you simply have to do it. Once again, for all of you who play first move d4, and for all of you who play first move e4, this is a great addition to your opening repertoire, simply because once you play knight g on e2, you can easily say, you know what, whenever I have my games, unfortunately I only play those blitz games, I always say, yes, that's the end of the story. Unless you face Nakamura, because you can be even winning after all these variations, but he's still very resourceful and finds a way to crush you. So after knight g on e2, they have three moves. They have d5, they have c5, they have bishop b4, and they have bishop e7. I played a couple of my games against bishop e7. It's a bad move. You just play e5, kicking this knight away. I always like when I get a chance to kick the knight away from the king side, from actually being around the king. Then it actually means that you have great chances to launch the attack. So knight e5, you take, go for castles, and this is an interesting moment. Usually when I played my blitz games, I moved my knight up to f4 because I was just thinking, like, if I move knight f4, I'm gonna threaten to win an important OWENS defense, bishop and b7. And you know what? I just want to play queen h5 next, and if they play some g6, I'm gonna maybe sacrifice something on g6 and to do something like that. But that's not a point. Actually, here you gotta keep this bishop open, but you just have to do the same thing. So knight goes to c3, threatening the bishop, keeping both of these bishops open. So after they play bishop e7, queen comes to g4. You now threaten bishop h6 with devastating consequences for black. They have to play king h8. And the killer attacking plan here now by black coming right now. So let's go. Let's go here. I don't want to give you all the time puzzles where you have to find mate in one or mate in two moves, or just to find like some easy tactics. For example, you know what? Find a way to launch the attack with the white pieces here. So whoever wants to practice initiative, let's go, guys. You get this puzzle, you get like half a minute, maybe 1 minute, and you just have to tell me what should be your plan to attack the black king here. There is one very universal type of thing here. Take like 1 minute. Don't give me suggestions before you take that minute. And by the way, I'm willing to say hello to all of you, but these are official lectures that we publish out afterwards on YouTube, and that's why I'm not mentioning any ones of your names. Afterwards, we're just going to stream and to have some fun. So then I will gladly have chat to all of you and simply say hi to all of you name by name. But don't expect to do that during the lectures. And don't ever tell me hi during the lectures. Of course, I'm joking. So let's go. Well. I see a couple of my students are watching this lecture, and couple of them are just mentioning the right plan. So you guys have a great coach. Sorry, who's your coach, man? Yes, exactly. So the move should be rook e1, using the rook lifting and going with this rook to e3 and going to h3 eventually. Of course, you can call me Maya, but don't tell me hi. And actually, I'm joking. Actually, tell me hi, but don't expect to answer you during the lectures. Anyways, this is how it works, and this is definitely killing attack by white. So bishop e7 doesn't work. Please remember this. This is like Russians used to say tabia position. Tabia means initial position, critical position. Actually, initial position from which we actually have like couple of, more like a crossroad in one variation, from where you have like couple of critical variations that you have to know all. So after like knight g on e2, they have another variation, bishop b4. Lately, I faced this variation a lot. Nakamura did it against me here on chess.com in February 2017. We played a game. After the opening, I was winning, but just like I said, it didn't help. I played a3, bishop takes, and I took by knight. You know what? I just considered I had a bishop pair, healthy pawn structure, very attacking position, which I certainly like to play with the white pieces. And I said myself, this is going to be another enjoyable game where simply I can't lose this time. So definitely white enjoys very effective and kind of easy development. So after like knight c3, they play either d6 or d5. Nakamura played d5 against me. I played e5, knight e4, and they already made a mistake. I didn't play the most accurately here, so I took on e4, played queen g4, he played king f8, I played I played bishop e3. I was greedy. Instead of that, of course, I should have played active and played queen g4 with much better game. But let me just show you what was the refutation. After knight e4, you just played the queen g4, very simple move, threatening the pawn on g7 and threatening the knight on e4. I'll tell you what I was confronting with during that, for example, blitz game. He's certainly one of the best blitz players ever, and in the world at the moment, altogether with Carlsen, the best one. I simply couldn't believe that after 9 moves, he could be completely lost. And that's why I didn't even consider a move like queen g4. So don't take things for granted during your games, even when you're playing better opponents, not to mention like guys that are worse than you. And look at this. I mean, the guy is one of the best players in the world. So queen g4, what is completely winning. Pawn on g7 is threatened, and I just take the pawn for nothing. For example, if they go g6, I take here. This is a bit of difficulty. This one. I mean, don't take immediately on e4. I mean, even that one should win. For example, they can play h5, queen g3, but you still have the same. By the way, they can never touch it because you play rook d1 followed by rook d8, and it's checkmate. That's very interesting. If d takes e4, you once again have this killing move, and they don't have a dark square bishop, so look at the squares. These are so bad dark squares, and once again, queen cannot take because of rook d1 and delivering checkmate on the back rank. So after like king f8, you just have to play this move. For example, that's another difficult move to find in a blitz game. Why? Because you remove your knight. You don't want to give that knight on e4 an easy time escaping there and actually simply taking on c3, and you now threaten to win the piece in one move. So they have to play c5, you play f3, c4, you take, and here you just take this pawn. You're up a pawn, but it's not being up a pawn. Actually, you have a nice stable center. You're gonna make castle, you're gonna attack along the e file, dark square bishop is open, and your opponent is dead. Unfortunately, I just wasn't on the top of my skills in that game, and I just lost that game playing some bishop e4 and pretty boring bishop e3. You know what? Even after bishop e3, castles, queen g4, f5, I had a bit of a better position even here, but you know what? It didn't help that much. We played like 60-70 moves, but in the late endgame he managed to trick me somewhere. Anyways, after knight c3, d6. So you play e5. Once again, I tried to explain you this pattern. When your opponent doesn't have like many minor pieces around the king, especially when he hasn't castle, when he doesn't have knight, when he doesn't have, for example, in this case, the dark square bishop, and you do have it, then immediately kick the knight away and immediately launch the attack. So after d takes knight e5, queen g4, that's the way it is. You just play king f8, bishop g5, or in case they go with g6, you play bishop g5, g6, bishop g5, queen c8, knight e4. You fully take advantage of the dark squares, threatening c4, knight f6, and you know what? Just out of curiosity to show you one trick, you have this trick. If they play like this, okay, I probably played the worst move to show you the trick, because I still want to show you this one. Just remember this mating pattern, because it's not fully, this is typical mate, but it's not fully working because after a c4 they can play knight takes e5. So I just wanted to show you that very nice mating pattern. Okay, so let's go there. Knight a4, knight a6. You just kick it away and you just have this one as well. Anyways, this whole line with the bishop before is considered to be suspicious, and white is just better. So simple approach. That's why you put your knight on e2. You want to play a3, bishop c3, knight c3, and white is much better. So instead of bishop b4, they can play two main lines. And believe it or not, after these two main lines, we're going to complete this pretty short lecture. Once again, it's a popular variation lately, but not that good according to the latest analysis. I'll be honest, the very first time when I realized about this variation was by international master from Scotland, Andrew Great, who published out this variation in his book, and then I just added like big number of analysis and games of mine playing this variation. So let's go. Knight g on e2. So after knight g on e2, they have to play d5 or c5. Let's go for d5. Let's go for d5 because I had some very nice games there. After e5, they have to play either knight e4 or knight f to d7. In the game was knight f to d7. In like biggest number of my games, including the one yesterday that I played knight f to d. My opponents went for knight f to d7. Couple of my opponents in the past played knight to e4. You know what? Here you have stable type of advantage. And you have another very, let's just say, bizarre way of playing. A bizarre way of playing is knight b1, trying to prove that the knight on e4 is in the middle of nowhere. So you can just threaten to play f3. I had one game against Grandmaster Savic from Serbia, similar to this position, where I retreated my knight and I won that game pretty easily. It came like a complete shock to my opponent during the game. Also, you can take here on e4 and play bishop to a3, where afterwards you just want to play knight g3, queen g4, and win the pawn on e4, because it turns out that a pawn on e4 is just weak and you want to take it. And finally, they can go knight d7. If they go knight d7, the true point of the whole variation is coming right now. So you play knight to f4. For the first time, we have something very, very tactical here, threatened, and very, seriously, they're just lost in one move. Yesterday, I played a game on chess.com. It was bullet game against international master from, I don't know, Austria, I believe. And the guy in this position played c5. It was a very interesting game. I took on e6. He played f takes e6, queen h5. He played g6. And when I played bishop g6, he played f takes. I captured here. And after king e7, bishop g5. No, it wasn't like this. It wasn't like this. Sorry. This is another analysis. This is actually what is your threat in this position. In my game was something else. I'll show you that one. So after like knight f4, you threaten the following variation. So knight takes e6, followed by queen h5, bishop g6, and bishop g5. You know what? I have no doubts that I made it so many guys in previous way or just won their queen. But it wasn't like this. Somehow my opponent had a pawn on f6 and I made a very, very nice trick there. I can't remember right now. Doesn't matter. You know what? They all see that knight takes e6 and queen h5 is threatened. So like big number of players can go with queen h4. Then you play this knight b5. This is nice. I like it so much. And now you're stretching queen. Between defending the king side and between defending the queen side. So after like knight b5, knight a6. Literally the only move. Otherwise, if the queen goes back to d8, I don't want to explain you that. You just sack on e6 and win the game on the spot. So after like knight b5, the only move is knight a6. And you play c3. I very much like this move, because you're restricting the bishop, you're restricting the knight. The knight is pretty much tied up for this weakness on c7. They can't play c6. Bishop on b7 means nothing. Queen on h4 is only there for defensive purposes, and white is just much better. But the point is coming. Even if they want to get rid of this knight on b5, you just play g3, and after like queen d8, you boom boom boom, knight takes e6 followed by queen h5. So makes no difference. Wait a sec, now this thing crossed my mind. So this is how I played against my opponent. He played c5. I played here this one, queen h5, and my opponent, instead of playing g6, he went for king e7. So sorry, I knew that the pawn was on g7, but couldn't remember this one. And look what happened. No, actually, I'm gonna give you a puzzle here. White moves and wins. Let's go. I remember my game. It happened yesterday in late hours, 3 a.m., chess.com, and I still managed to find that tactics. You've got like 30 seconds. White moves and wins. It's not easy, but it's very typical. I've seen so many French positions in similar fashion. Once again, right after this, it's, sorry, but it's white. Who's on move? Bishop g5, knight f6. What do you want? Bishop g5, knight f6. I'm defending. If you take on f6, g takes f6, fully defending myself. And don't give me one move, give me the whole line. I mean, why would be bishop g5 winning? Discoveries says knight b5. So let's go. Don't give me one move, because I want to make sure. Somebody found it. Exactly. So bishop g5. I was trying to be tricky here. Yes, bishop g5 is the move. And if they play knight f6, probably that's what my opponent thought, that it should be good. Then you take and boom, boom, boom. Once again, if the king takes, you have this very nasty check, and the queen on d8 is gone. So this is nice trick. And yes, like you see, it works in practice. Okay, congratulations for those who found this tactics. It's very, very nice. And like you see, works in practice. So after a knight f4, bishop e7. I've seen this move a lot of times. I played like bunch of games like this. The following variation is really beautiful, but it's extremely, extremely hard to learn. Not like first couple of moves, but sometimes it can take even next 15 moves. So queen g4, you know what? If they play castles, you play queen h5, you sack knight, you sack bishop, you give check, and you go with this one. It's a typical way of going there. You're at the moment 2 pieces down. For how many pawns? For only 3. It's not enough. It would be enough for one piece. You threaten to win in one move, playing the queen g4. The queen e8 doesn't work because queen g4, queen g7 is checkmate. So it's actually yes, in both of these cases. So they just have to defend this position. It's practically very difficult for them to defend, because if rook f7, you just give queen g6, king h8, queen takes f7. If queen e8, queen g4, king h8, queen g7, queen e8, queen g4, king f7, queen g7. So mate in all these variations. This is why they all play g6. And you know what? This really looks almost like unbreakable, like a Berlin Wall. But all of a sudden, we're just finding a way to break the communist law. So knight takes the communist wall. So knight takes e6, f takes e6, and bishop takes g6. This is nice. After they, you know, this double piece sack is very difficult to find during the game. You just have to be the hell great at tactics. So all you have to do is just to learn this one. So after like king f8, bishop h6, this one, and you look at this, queen h7, and the key move comes now. I played this position a couple of times. Most of my opponents, even good ones, thought that this could be like pretty cool for black, because I don't have anything more than perpetual check. And look what happens here. So you play here, key move, knight to e2, and this knight goes to f4, trying to take the pawn on e6 or g6. After queen e8, I'll just show you one of my games. My opponent one of my opponents tried to stop that. Then I just played h4, and it's completely winning because of two things. I want to bring my knight here with checkmate. I want to use the rook lifting and mate like this. My opponent played in a funny way, queen e8. Looks like he's going to defend himself. I played knight f4, he played queen f7. I played check, simply deflecting his queen from defending e6 pawn. I came up with this check, took the queen, took on c7, and I had one of the most interesting positions in my blitz career so far. So I had like 5 pawns and 2 rooks against 4 minor pieces. It's very interesting. And you don't have to be Kasparov to play this position. All you have to do is just to push these pawns like crazy. Okay. After like knight f4, they can play bishop e7. They can play queen h4. I've showed you that. They can play g6. After queen g4, you once again threaten the same thing if they play bishop e7. So if they play bishop e7, I just showed you knight takes e6, bishop takes g6 with the following combinations. So they just have to go with queen e7. And this is the moment where I have to mention once again my game against Hamilton played on ICC. I played knight b5, knight a6, and the key move is b3. Actually, I found out about this game a couple years ago when I analyzed the game by Czech Grandmaster Orel, who played this for the first time, and I really find it nice. Because look at the pawn structure by black, it's completely broken. Look at the weaknesses. There are like so many weaknesses in this position. Knight on a6 is definitely only, actually only has like defensive purposes there. Bishop on b7 does nothing. Queen on e7 is not happily placed, desperately looking for some long castle. After a long castle, you just have to take the pawn. This loses a pawn, but it's hard to suggest anything else in that position anyways. So after knight b4, you can play like this and carry on being up a pawn. I played couple of games like this. Like usually some better guys go into this variation because they know for these lines, but simply it's almost undefendable for black. Black is really winning here. White is really winning here. You're up a pawn, and on the top of all that, you can even push these pawns on the queen side, getting a completely winning position and using the attack. This is not all. It's all about variation with d5, but there is another line. Here, c5. This variation was considered to be probably the only variation against this system. And once again, we just have to see like the real refutation, and the refutation is based on this pawn sacrificed. This is a really aggressive and really ambitious approach by white. And let me just show you there. You sack the pawn. Anything else by black, like taking the pawn and actually taking once on d5 and then playing d6, cannot be suggested here for black. They simply have to accept this pawn. If they play such an opening, they have to take it. If they play d6, it's like admitting that we have like great opening advantage already, and this is really good. So let's go. We go with the castles, bishop e7 and knight g3. We now threaten knight f5. And when my opponent, they cannot stop it with g6 because then you play bishop h6 and they can never make castle. That's usually a thing there. So after castles, after like knight f5, rook e8, knight takes e7, and bishop g5. Here, white is up a bishop pair, threatens bishop b5. Why bishop b5 is threatened here? Because I want to play like queen f3 and rook to e1. Of course, he just wants to remove that rook before he takes the e-file fully, because sometimes if you play queen f3, rook e1 wouldn't be possible because of queen e1. But even those are not possible because you always have a defender on d3. Never mind, this is like much better position for white. Anyways, in this position, they simply have to go for e takes d5 and to accept the challenge. They simply have to go all in. Knight takes d5, you take, bishop d5, castles. And here I have to show you what was practically considered to be good enough for black to hold in these positions. So, you know what? They have to put the bishop back to e6. I'll show you at least 15 games of mine played against different kinds of levels. IMs, FMs, candidate masters, national masters. They go bishop e7 many times. You play knight f4. Once again, the point of having unusual knight on e2 in comparison with the knight on f3. So let's go. Knight f4, threatening the bishop on d5. They have to move it. They usually move it back to b7 to simply keep that bishop on the strong diagonal and to keep having some threats there. After like bishop e7, let's imagine they put it back on e6. You take on e6, and after d takes e6, you play queen g4, threatening the pawn. And if they try to defend it, like castles, because here bishop h6 doesn't work because of bishop f6, you just play easy. Queen e4, and you threaten checkmate on h7 and rook on a8. Don't forget about this one. This happens very, very often in practice of all kinds of levels. So this is nice trick. It's very nice and it's easy to blunder because it goes from queen comes from g4 and then goes to e4. It's nice. Another thing, if they play like g6, you have this one. This, check. They have to go here. Check. They have to go here. And then you go with queen e4, threatening this knight, and they can't stop everything because if the knight comes to d7, you can here enjoy in torturing your opponent. You can take on d7 because they cannot recapture. Rook is hanging, but they can also play. You can also play rook to d1, pinning this knight and torturing your opponent even more. So that's all winning completely. If they play f takes e6, you just play check. If they play g6, you just play bishop g6 and it's winning. If they just play like king f8, you have this check, and once again they suffer because of bad light squares and this bad diagonal. So all these variations are just really, really bad. This is why they all go after bishop e7, knight f4, they go to b7. And looks like they will have some chances to defend themselves. You go rook e1. You now threaten to move your queen to g4 or up to h5, or to play simply, some queen e2 just to stop that castle because e7 is hanging. But of course, queen g4 is the main threat, and they all go for castles, feeling like, thanks God, I made castle, no more danger. But the real mate is coming now. Queen h5. You threaten mate in 1 on h7. They have to play g6. You sack the knight. You now threaten to take on e7 and deliver checkmate at queen h7. They gotta take it. You sack the bishop. They once again have to take it. Queen takes g6. And after king h8, move that you all have to be familiar with. It's rook goes to e5 using this rook lifting. Once again, I'll repeat it. I'm not lying to you if I'm telling you that I won more than 10, 15 games like this. Exact the same way. So usually they all go for bishop e6 just because of that. So they are not supposed to play that bishop e7. After like bishop e6, we go knight f4. We now threaten knight takes e6. Let me just show you what happens. For example, if they play, they have to play bishop e7 or they have to play knight c6. Bishop e7 happens exactly the same position that we previously checked. So they have to play knight c6. Finally covering that weak diagonal, the light squares as well, and everything seems to be working fine for them in this situation. And look what's happening right now. After knight c6, you take on e6. D takes e6. In case and f takes e6 loses in the view of queen h5, what else? So d takes e6. Here I can just give you probably the last puzzle, but difficult puzzle for tonight, because literally every single move is enough for a slight advantage for white, just slight. In some variations the position is even unclear. One move is complete killer, and because of that move this whole system, Owen's defense, is considered to be bad nowadays. Let's go. It's white to move. Who finds this move? Well, I was about to give some promises, but I can't. Maybe I can just give him a match of 10 games playing against me, but now you're going to probably take a look at the engines and find it. Bishop b5 followed by queen f3. Most of you just come up with that one. Queen f3, bishop b5. Everybody keeps mentioning the same thing again and again. Again and again, again and again, and again and again. And you can now try to play bishop b5 or queen f3. You can play out those variations after this lecture, but you'll see it's not enough. So you have to play here third most important move in the whole variation. It's the bishop f4. This is the killer move. It stops everything, absolutely everything in terms of development in a black's game. It cuts off bishop d6. It cuts off queen c7. This is GM move, this bishop f4. So I just gave you like very difficult puzzle there, but I'll show you what the point is. You can play bishop d6. You cannot bring your queen on c7 to defend your knight on c6. Why it's important? Because in some lines, I'm gonna play bishop e5. And let's imagine the bishop was not on f4. You would have queen c7, and when white plays queen f3, then they have rook c8. Here it's not gonna be possible. So they won't have like double defender. Just because of bishop f4, you also not allowing your opponent to complete development with bishop d6 and short castle, because if they do it, sorry, bishop e5, double threat, basic chess tactics, and white is dead winning. After bishop f4, they just have to go with rook c8. And the true point behind these bishops, it's coming right now. Bishop a6. Wow, what a great line again. Once again, I have to tell you one thing. I played like 2 games, exact same moves. Queen d1, rook f to d1. Look at this. Rook cannot go to b8 because of bishop. Rook cannot go to a8 because of bishop. So simply the only place for this rook is rook to d8. And after rook to d8, you play bishop e5. So now you use like full potential of the bishop pair, even though you're down a pawn. They have to play rook c8, and you play this move. You just want to double up your rooks, and you want Chile to play rook d6. Getting position where you would have like two bishops for the rook. That would be dead winning. They have to play f6. When I played that game of mine, I thought that after f6, my opponent will defend himself. I thought, during the game that something really went wrong for me because I was down a pawn, queens were off. So I just tried to play the most active and the most logical moves, trying to still prove that I can do something here. Rook e1, e5, bishop e3. My opponent played the only move. Bishop e7, and I played rook d7. I have to say that I was very satisfied when I played this move. Eventually, I easily won the game because it turned out that I played all the strongest moves, and it's white. Okay, it's not difficult to play the strongest moves because you're down the pawn. You have to play active. You have to double these rooks. You have to keep this knight pinned on c6. And, after this move, they cannot even make castle because of bishop c6, rook takes e7. So they just have to play something like king to f7, king to f7. And you know what the killer move here should be? It's c3. Completely restricting this knight. Two bishops are now showing off in this position. They can't move the king anywhere. They can't play rook d8 because of bishop c6. Simply, this is almost Zugzwang for black, and white is completely winning. You know what? Believe it or not, this is one of shorter lectures against one opening, and I just have to say we're about to finish this one. I hope you liked it, and I hope you're gonna have many nice and especially easy wins using this analysis. You know what? One day, if you win one of your games thanks to this analysis, just mention where did you see, on which channel, chessbrah channel, where did you see these lines, by whom did you see, and who was the guy who showed this analysis to you, and thanks to him you won all your tournament or blitz games. I hope that you like this short lecture. That was a short one, and I'm about to continue playing some blitz games